Hi, everyone. It is Sunday, June 29th at 8 p.m., and it is our 15th class of David's Diary. It's actually going to be our last for this season, I guess they call it. And tonight's shir, hold on, waiting for it to upload. Tonight's learning is dedicated by the Friedman and Hartman families in memory of Chaim Zev ben Mordechai Zichrono Livracha. Okay, and now we are going to jump in as I make it larger. Hold on, perfect. Just going to bring us back together from last week because I don't know about people outside of Israel, but people who are here in Israel with me, the fact that that was only a week ago feels surreal, I guess, is the best way to describe it. In many ways, it's just been not only a roller coaster, but I feel like in certain ways this past week was a lot of whiplash of just like, wait, we feel this way, we feel this way. So just to get us all centered, I know for myself, I need to get centered. So hopefully you will join me. We ended last week's shiur that Dovid finally takes the throne, right? Ishbosheth was killed by Rechav and Bana. He kills their assassinators, right? Sorry, Dovid kills Rechav and Bana, who killed Ishbosheth, right? Because he said, how dare you? Why would you think this is something I would want? Not only does he kill them, he has them publicly hanged, right? I want the world to know that I was not anti-Ishbosheth. I didn't want this, right? And it takes 5 years, but ultimately the people of Israel come to Hebron, ask him to become their king, and he becomes the king over the entire Jewish people and sets up the capital of his kingdom in Yerushalayim, which then that section becomes Ir David, right? Which is amazing that it's still for us today. So what we're going to watch today, which it's so, obviously it's always Siyata Dishmaya and God running the show, but I feel like really the culmination of everything and the epitome of who David HaMelech is are going to be the little snippets of stories we're going to see tonight. So I just felt like it was a perfect pause point, a perfect closing to this, this round of the David's Diary course, that you get to see who he is as a king, what makes David so special, right? Because if you remember Shaul, right, our first king, what was his downfall? Number one, he gave into the peer pressure of the people, right? Whenever they pushed for something, he went with it, which means he prioritized the people and their wants over God, right? And the main points of a king are, number one, to be that shaliach of God, right? To be the representation to the people of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And number two, to fight wars, right? Those were the two main goals. And what we're going to watch tonight is how incredible David is, what he is able to do in those realms. So we're going to jump back into Parakeh. We left in the middle, right? We had just finished the piece of him conquering Yerushalayim and moving in. So now we are in Parakeh Pasuk Yud Aleph. Vayishlach Hiram Melech Tzor Malachim El David. So Hiram, who is the king of Tzor, sends messengers to David. Now, again, also the more versed you are in Nevi'im in general, it's always helpful, and you start feeling parts of the puzzle coming together. This Hiram, right, who's going to help David, we'll see in a minute, is also going to show up in Malachim Aleph for Shlomo, David's son, right? So this is going to be, oh gosh, these reactions. I don't know how to shut this off. Do you see the fireworks that just went off? I hope I don't know how to do this, but maybe Ezra, since you're here, maybe at some point you will teach me how to shut off all of these reactions, because last time I got balloons for some hand motion I made. So I apologize. So Hiram is going to show up not only here, but he's going to re-show up in Sefer Malachim for Shlomo. So this Hiram sends messengers to David, and what does he send? Atzei arazim v'charashei eitz v'charashei even kir v'yivnu bayit leDavid. Right? What an incredible, thoughtful gift, right? And I always think it's I don't think it's what the Navi is trying to really highlight, but it's something I definitely take away from this, right? What gift does he send Hiram? Hiram sends David. He sends him cedar trees and those who know how to work with cedar wood and know how to work with these specific types of avanim. And this is such an incredible gift because we don't have cedar trees in Israel, right? This wood is something that he knows Israel can't provide, but he knows is really helpful in building. And he's also understands that, wait, if you don't have cedar trees, because Israel doesn't have cedar trees, then you clearly don't have people who know how to work with it. So I'm not only going to send you the wood that would be so massively helpful, but in addition, I'm going to send you the people who know how to use it, right? Which is just such an incredibly thoughtful gift. So this is what he sends David to build a house for David, right? And at this point, Pasuk Yudbet, Vayeda David, Ki hechino Hashem lemelech al Yisrael. And it's almost like this is the tipping point for David. When an outsider, when other people outside of the Jewish people acknowledge and are sending gifts for him to set up shop, so to speak, to him, now I understand. Like, now I know this is God taking care of everything, because where else would these people come from? So clearly God has done this for me. Right? And also look at the humility. It's not because I'm awesome that I'm going to be king. I know that God is making me king because he wants to ensure stability for Am Yisrael, right? This isn't about me. This is about them, right? Which he's showing us all the crucial ingredients for the kingdom, right? Number one, understand that it's all from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And number two, it's not anything about you. It's totally about taking care of Am Yisrael. So he gets all of those messages. Pasuk Yud Gimel, Vayikach David od pilagshim v'nashim Yerushalayim acharei bo mechavron v'yivaldu od leDavid banim ubanot. Right. So I think 2 or 3 classes ago we got to see David with his 2 wives at the time, right? Achinoam and Abigail, and the kids he had there. Then he got Michal back, right? Even though she was technically his first wife, she comes back in almost as number 3. Telling us now, once he's in Yerushalayim and now he's set up, now he's going to have many more wives and many children, right? Sons and daughters. Back in Hebron, he only had sons. Pasuk Yud Daled, Ve'ela Shemot HaYilodim Lo B'Yerushalayim, right? And as we mentioned then, it's not in chronological order. It's going to tell us all the children that will ultimately be born, even though they have not yet been born. So here are the children he is going to have: Shamua v'Shovav, Natan u'Shlomo, V'Yivchar ve'Elishua, Nefeg ve'Afia, Elishama ve'Eliada, ve'Eliphalet. Right? Those are going to be the children that over the years in Yerushalayim, these are the children that will be born to him. And here, the tides are changing. Right? Pasuk Yud Zayin, Vayishmeu Plishtim. Et David Lamelech al Yisrael. Don't forget, it's been now 7.5 years since that time he had been in Gat and he had all of those peace treaties, right? So now, David's king, right? It's not just Hebron, it's not just that small area. He is the ruler. Okay, like, we want to make sure that the Jews don't delude themselves and think they're in a stable time. Just because you have a king doesn't mean you're going to have stability, say the Plishtim. So once they hear that David is the king, Vaya'alu kol Plishtim, levakesh et David, right? This isn't a small battle. The entire army of the Plishtim gather together, levakesh et David, right? They want to kill him, right? Because to them, it was amazing when the Jews had no king, right? They probably did horrible crimes in that time. They probably killed many people, right? So now it's like, oh, okay, they have a king and they think they can protect themselves. Let's just take him down. But what happens? Vayishma David hears what's happening. Vayered el hamitzudah. So he goes down to this area of the mitzudah. Pasuk Yudchet, uplishtim ba'u vaynatshu be'emek Rephaim. Right? So he's going down in this area. The plishtim are now coming towards that area in Emek Rephaim. Pasuk Yudtet, vayishal David bashem lemor. And David asks God, saying, Ha'e'eleh el haplishtim. Right? What do you want me to do? Right? Do I just stand here and be on the defense? Or do you want me to offensively go in for this? Right? And if I do offensively go in, is this going to go well for us? Right? I'm not setting us up for failure. Right? So, Vayomer Hashem al David, Hashem responds to David, Aleh. Go, right? Be on the offensive, charge, so to speak. Kinaton aten et haplishtim biyadecha. I will give you the plishtim, aka you will win the war. David bebal pratim, vayakim sham David, right? And David goes with his army and they wipe them, right? Vayakim, it's a total wipeout by Yomer, and he says, Parat Hashem et oivai lefanai, kiperetz mayim, right? God literally sprouted our enemies as if it was just flowing water. Alkein karashim hamakom bal pratim, and he names the place Bal pratim, right? Major success, Pasuk of Aleph, vayazvusham. David, right? Amazing. He wins the war. It's great. And everyone leaves, and it seems like all's good. But no. Right? Some time goes by, and more plishtim start to come. Right? And again, they gather in that area by Emek Rephaim. David Bashem. And David asks God again. But this time, Vayomer Hashem, right? What does God say to him? Lo tala, I don't want you to go up, right? Don't go face charging into this war. Hasev et acharehem ubata lahem mimul b'chaim. Right? So interesting. Hashem says, no. Last time I told you, like, go up and just go, right? But this time Hashem says, whatever God knows, literally, I don't want you charging them head on. I want you to go around, right? Hasev, go around to the back, right? Mimul, and then attack from opposite them, right? Pasuk Dalid, Vayehi kisham acha et kol tzada v'rashay habechaim az techarat. And don't even attack them. You just go there and wait. And then when you hear the sounds that they're coming to attack you, then you pounce, so to speak. Ki az yatsa Hashem lefanecha lahakot b'machane plishtim. Because only then, and I'm going to be with you to fight the plishtim. Right? What's so powerful about this part of the scene, even before we see what happens in the war, is you can already feel the difference of David than Shaul. Right? Meaning after Shaul would have won that first battle, at least personally, I would have assumed that Shaul, if the Plishtim kept coming at him, he would have been like, okay, well, God told me to go before, so like, yalla, let's go. Especially if the army would have pressured him in any way, right? If the Jewish army was like, yalla, we just won, right? We're feeling so confident and good about this, yalla, let's just finish them off. I think Shaul would have totally listened. But there was no ego for David. Right? Even though he was so successful in that battle, this is a new battle. And therefore I have to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu again. And not only do I have to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu again, God is so specific, tells him exactly what to do, but to wait for a specific moment, because if you don't wait, I'm not going to be with you. And that's exactly what he does. Pasuk Vavhei, Vayas David came, Ka'asher Tzivahu Hashem. Right? If only we would have seen a pasuk like that about Shaul, right? David does exactly as God commanded. Vayach et plishtim migeva ad boacha gazer. And he completely wipes out and wins this battle, right? And it's such a gorgeous end to this parak and an introduction to David as king, right? This is mamash our first action we're watching out of David, right? He took the throne. Yes, he got a gift from Hiram to build a house, but we didn't see him do anything, right? But Parak Hay ends with his first major war, and what a huge success, but totally because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And David is the one who will 100% give 100% of that credit to God, because I'm sure he was pressured by the army, like, let's go. No, we wait. Hashem says, we wait. And what an incredible role model, right? What a lesson to the people of this is how it works. We'll win the wars as long as HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us he's with us, right? We need to wait for that moment. And with that, we'll jump into the next scene. Much harder. This parak is much, much harder to swallow, to understand, but it really makes David who he is. So it's obviously crucial. Right, so now we enter into Perek Vav, Pasuk Aleph. Vayosef od David et kol bachur Yisrael, shloshim Aleph. David gathers all the young soldiers of the Jewish people, which was 30,000 men. Okay, 30,000 people he gathers. Pasuk bet, vayakam, vayelech David v'kol ha'am asher ito miba'alei Yehuda v'halot misham et Aron ha'elokim asher nikra shem Hashem tzvakot yoshev hakruvim alav. Right now that David is the king, not only is he the king, he just won some wars, right? He's feeling good about things. He's feeling settled about things. What does he also want to settle? The Aron, right? The Aron has been living in somebody's house all of these years since the Plishtim took down Shiloh, right? And therefore, David decides, okay, Higia Hazman. The time has come to go bring the Aron back to Yerushalayim. So he gathers these 30,000 men, not for a war, but for a parade, right? He wants to parade the Aron back to Yerushalayim. Pasuk Gimel, Vayarkivu et Aron Elokim el Agalah Hadashah. And the people who had the Aron built this beautiful new chariot to carry the Aron. Vayisauhu mi Beit Avinadav asher begiv'ah. Right, it was in this man named Avinadav's house who lived in Nachala Binyamin, so it's not far from Yerushalayim, right, in Giv'ah. Ve'uza ve'achyo b'nei Avinadav nohagim et ha'agala chadasha. Right, and his two sons, Avinadav's two sons, Uza and Achyo, were in charge of the chariot. They were going to be the ones ki'ilu driving this chariot. Now, I just want to make sure we're all aware, of the Aron and how generally it's carried. Right, it has the two badim, right, those two major poles, and the way it's described in Vayikra, right, is only Kohanim are allowed to carry the poles. And not only that, right, but to top it off on that, so to speak, was the idea that the way the Psukim describe it is that the Aron carried the Kohanim, right? Not the other way around. Technically, the Kohanim were the ones, in theory, carrying it, but in practice, it carried the carriers, right? It was literally magical. The Nisim around the Aron were wow, right? So it's been in Abinadab's house all this time, and his two sons are in charge of the chariot. Pasuk Dalid. Vayisauhu Beit Abinadav asher begivah im Aron ha'elokim. So they all start traveling out of Abinadab's house with the Aron in the new chariot. Achyo holech lifnei ha'aron. And Achyo is leading, like, front of the Aron. Pasuk Hey, v'David v'kol Beit Yisrael misachakim lifnei Hashem. And all of his 30,000 men are all singing and dancing before God, right? B'chol atzib roshim u'b'kinorot binvalim u'b'tufim u'v'na'naim u'tziltzlaim. Right, I always love these words that they sound like the sound, right? All these beautiful different musical instruments are being played. It's this stunning live band going with this parade, but Pasuk Vav, Vayavohu ad Goren Nachon, they get to the area of Goren Nachon, Vayishlach Uza, El Aron Ha'elokim, Vayochezbo, Kishamtu Habakar, right? All of a sudden, there must have been some sort of ditch in the road, and the animals leading the chariot, they stumbled, right? Like that jerk move. And all of a sudden, what does Uza do? He puts out his hands because he's nervous about the Aron, because the whole chariot just shook. But Pasuk Zayin, Vayichar af Hashem b'Uza. God is livid with Uza. Vayakehu sham Elokim al hashal, vayamat sham im Aron Elokim. Right, and because he had put out his hands and touched the Aron, God was so angry, he literally kills him immediately, and Uza dies right there. Now, number one, I think this is just such a hard pasuk to read. I don't think there's an easy way to really have any understanding of what went on in this pasuk, right? I think the text and even the Mefarshim try to highlight, right? It's asur to touch it. Everybody knew. You shouldn't have had to worry about the Aron. Of course, you don't have to worry about the Aron. It carries its carriers. So what is the problem? What does it matter? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think any of us reading this pasuk, it's heartbreaking. right? These are the moments that we look at HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we say, really? He was trying to help. Really? He didn't want it to fall, right? At least personally, I can show you all the different mafarshim. There's nothing that makes me feel better, right? There's nothing that you read this pasuk and you're like, oh, okay, it makes sense. I think it's one of those psukim that Hashem is trying to say, you will never understand my ways, right? And a rule is a rule is a rule. And if I told you never to touch it and to trust it, then the answer is never touch it and trust it, right? And at least for me, I think it's so incredibly apropos and timely for us in this specific week, right? As we enter for Parshat Chukat, right? This is the Parsha where Moshe hits the rock instead of talking to the rock and is punished, told that because of that nuanced detail, right? Because he didn't talk to the rock and he hit the rock and he didn't make the big enough Kiddush Hashem, Hashem says, well, now you can't go into Israel. And now you can't be the leader while they're in Israel. And again, there are amazing mafarshim and there are beautiful ideas. But I think just the main takeaway, no matter how many ideas we can study and understand, is Hashem saying, you will never understand my ways. A rule is a rule is a rule. Love is in the details, and I gave you details and you didn't follow them, right? And to me, that's the only answer I can generally find, that at least on whatever level I can understand, I understand that Uzzah here should have known, especially if it was in his house for all those years. He knew the halachot of the Aron. He should have trusted it. He didn't, and therefore he is killed. Pasuk Chet. But this is obviously going to have a major impact on David, right? Vayichar LeDavid al asher paratz Hashem peretz be'uzah, right? Who is he angry at? God, right? David is angry that God paratz, right? Sprout forward in this peretz uzah, right? Same word we saw just a chapter ago in the war, right? We saw that he named that area of the war that God just popped out, right? And now he's saying, God, you popped out again, but like so inappropriately. What are you doing, God? Right? I'm so angry about this, God. And he names the place Peretz Uzah because he's still so upset. Ad hayom hazeh, right? Until this day, it's still called that. But Pasuk Tet, I think, fully wraps it together for us. Vayira David et Hashem bayom hahu. David feared God on that day. And I think this pasuk, number one, it's in theory so unnecessary, right? Of course he does. Of course, he just told us he was angry. Obviously, I can go with the next emotion. But the psukim are letting us know the David we have known until this point, right? He encapsulates Ahavat Hashem, right? He is the author of at least 70 prakim of Sefer Tehillim. His emunah is unparalleled. Him seeing God in a gorgeous light is his middle name. But something shifted today. He always had Ahavat Hashem, but in Pasuk Tet, a new dimension was added. Vayira David et Hashem. Right now, he has Yirat Hashem. Now he is scared. Now, again, I think the whole parak is hard to swallow and grapple with, etc. But I think this was crucial for David to add this ingredient to his relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because yes, so many say that the highest level of connecting to God is Ahavat Hashem, is love, right? But no matter how much love you have, there also has to be an element of Yira, right? It's not just Avinu, it's Avinu Malkeinu, right? We need both dimensions. We need to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in both ways to fully follow the halachot that we need to and to be the best we can be, right? Yira is a healthy emotion, and therefore this is a new dimension. I imagine David wished it came in another way, but this was a super crucial dimension as he becomes the king, because part of that is he has to learn to instill that in the people also, that Yirat Hashem and Yira of the Melech is crucial for a kingdom to sustain itself. And therefore, this was an incredibly important learning moment for David, right? But it's a little too intense for him. So he is scared on that day, Vayomer, and he legitimately says, "Eich yavo elai aron Hashem," right? How, why, what, right? I'm not bringing the Aron Hashem, right? To me, absolutely not, right? Like that's crazy. Pasuk Yud. V'lo avat David lahasiri lavet Aron Hashem al ir David. And he changes the plan. He's like, after that scene, after watching what can happen when you have the best of intentions and literally you think you're doing something right, but the Aron is so sensitive and God is so sensitive that you could mess up that easily, and the punishment for that mess up is death. I don't want it. It doesn't need to be my neighbor, right? Originally, this whole thing was because I wanted the Arun to become my neighbor. I don't want it to be my neighbor anymore. Never mind, right? Game over. It's not coming. Therefore, Vayatehu David Beit Oved Edom Hagiti. Right? So he stops the parade, right? I get that out of deference to Uzzah, he stops the parade, but it's not just a pause. It's a nix, right? We're done with this. Put it somewhere else. And it goes to the house of Oved Edom Hagiti. Pasuk Yud Aleph. Vayeshav Aron Hashem Beit Oved Edom Hagiti, right? And that's where it lives. Shlosha Chodashim, for the next 3 months. And then, Vayivarech Hashem et Oved Edom. God blesses the house of Oved Edom vet kol beito, right? Not just him as an individual, his entire household is blessed because of this. Pasuk Yud Bet, Vayugad lemelech David lemor, right? So it's told to David saying, David, Beirach Hashem et Beit Oved Edom ve'et kol hasher lo ba'avur Aron ha'elokim, right? David, I think you're making a mistake because he is a good neighbor to have, right? You do want the Aron living amongst you because look what's happening to Oved Edom's house because of the Aron. It's not a curse, it's a blessing, right? You need to reframe your mind. Yes, something terrible happened that day. Yes, Uzzah made a fatal mistake, but you don't have to, David. And if you don't, it could bring so much blessing. And it's really the first step, right? It's the first step. Why does he want the Aron back, right? We're not going to get to this tonight because it's already, the next chapter opens up such a Pandora's box of so many other things. We're not going to go to the next parak. Don't worry, we're going to finish this parak. But the Aron is step one for the Beit HaMikdash, right? And they're saying, don't be scared of Kedusha, right? Yes, it can be overwhelming. It can be intimidating. But if treated properly, it brings blessing, right? So they give this message to David. And finally, I imagine a deep breath he takes. Vayelech David, Vayal et Aron ha'elokim mi Beit Oved Edom, ir David. And what a powerful word, bisimcha. And again, you learn so much about David in that one word, because look at all the emotions we just got to witness in 5 psukim, right? First in Pasuk Chet, Vayichar leDavid al asher paratz Hashem, right? David is so angry. And then we saw he is scared of God, right? And he goes and separates himself for the 3 months. And finally, people convince him to bring the Aron back, but there's no begrudging. To David, if I'm going to do something, my whole heart is in it, right? And I think those of us who read Tehillim or learn Tehillim in any way, you see that that's just who he is. He's too emotionally authentic, I think is the best way I would describe him, for him to ever do something that's not authentic. And therefore, it's not just going to be an act. I'm going to bring the simcha back, right? I'm only going to be willing to do this when I can do it with simcha, right? Which I think is the next lesson David's teaching us, right? God is saying, I don't need you to build it a house for it to have a house, right? It's lived without a house for months and years. I only want it if this is a whole picture of something you're doing. And he does. He does it b'simcha. Pasuk Yud Gimel. Vayehi ki tza'adu nosei Aron Hashem shisha tza'adim vayizbach shur umri. But this time it's a little different. It's not just a parade. It's not just with music, right? I imagine how slow and intense this is. Literally every eight, I don't know if it's literally steps or amounts that they each walk, then they bring karbanot, right? Pause point, right? Karbanot, up, did a few more steps, more karbanot, more thanks, right? The focus on God, not just the joy, but the God element. Pasuk Yudalid, David mecharker b'chol oz lifnei Hashem. David puts his whole heart and soul into his dancing with all of his strength before God. David, Hagor ephod bad, right? Even at points he was dancing with the ephod, right? Envision Simchas Torah on steroids, right? This incredible joy, just singing, dancing, but all with the full kavanah that this is Lifnei Hashem. It's Ki'ilu that He is the Chatan or the Kala you're dancing for, right? God is who we are appreciating. Bringing our own home is what we're appreciating. Pasuk Tetvav, David v'chol Beit Yisrael ma'alim et Aron Hashem. The entire nation joins David in bringing the Aron home. Betruah ubekol shofar, right? There's trumpets, there's shofrot, there's all different sounds going on of joy. And then, Pasuk Tetzayin, V'haya Aron Hashem ba'ir David, and when it was that the Aron made its whole way all the way to Ir David, right? And don't forget, if you're every few steps, or even if it's every half a mile, you're bringing karbanot. This is a long day, right? The Aron has finally gotten to Ir David. Umichal bat Shaul nishkefa ba'ad hachalon, right? And notice how she is referred to. She is not Michal Eshet David. Michal, the daughter of Shaul, is peering out the window, right? So this is already giving us a warning that in this scene, she is not going to be acting as David's wife. She is going to be acting as Shaul's daughter. What will that mean? Vatera et hamelech David mifazez umecharker lifnei Hashem. She sees, notice again, wording is always so crucial. She doesn't see her husband, David. She sees Hamelech, the king, who is David, right? Dancing with all of his heart and soul before God. Bativezlo biliba. She mocks him in her heart, right? Meaning she sneers, I imagine, inside, like, oh my God, what is he doing? I cannot believe what he's doing, right? And she'll be clear when they have their conversation. Pasuk Zayin, Vayaviu et Aron Hashem, Vayatzigo oto bimkomo. Right, so everyone brings the Aron in and they put it in the place they have designated for it. B'toch ha'ohel, they made a special tent for it. Asher natalo David, that David pitched, right, this special, beautiful tent designated for the Aron. Vaya'al David ulot lifnei Hashem ushlamim, right? And we're not done. We're back at bringing karbanot, right? Tons of karbanot. Pasuk Yudchet, Vayichal David mehalot ha'olah v'hashlamim. As soon as David is done bringing all these incredible karbanot, vayivarech et ha'am. He blesses the entire nation. Hold on, jumping to the next page. B'shem Hashem Tzvakot, right? In the name of God. And you can imagine the masses, right? There are tens of thousands of people, right? And he has brought hundreds of karbanot. And don't forget, every karban, especially the olah and the shlamim, you get to eat all of the meat, right? So they're just cutting up these animals to divvy them up, to cook them for everybody to feast. Pasuk Yitzhet, Vayichalek lekol ha'am. L'chol hamon Yisrael, me'ish ad isha, le'ish chalat lachem achat, ve'eshpar achat, ve'ashisha achat, right? Literally, he's making doggy bags, right? I always think of like, oh, what cute party favors, right? At weddings, you can get a bencher, right? Or, other party favors at different smachot, right? But what's so crazy here? What is the party favor for bringing the aron back, right? Everybody gets some challah, and everybody gets a few steaks, right? So everyone gets to take this meat and bread home, right? Can you imagine the joy? Free steaks. Everyone's getting, this is just a joyful, incredible scene, right? And vayelech kol ha'am ish lebeto. And then you start feeling literally the energy of the dust settling, but in a happy dust settle, right? Everyone's just like going home, everyone's smiling. It's just this happy, happy, joy, joy. But the streets are slowly, slowly emptying. Pasuk Chaf, vayashav David levarech et beito. Right now that he's done with the tens of thousands, now he's going to come to his family, right? What an incredible day this was. Oh my God, I can't wait to tell you guys about it. It was amazing. It was crazy. And of course, I saved all the best meats for you. We're going to have the best barbecue together. It's going to be delicious. It's going to be amazing. He's on a high. And then, Pasuk, still Pasuk off. Vatitze Michal bat Shaul. Likrat David. And again, notice how she's referred to, right? Michal, the daughter of Shaul, goes out to greet David, right? I imagine each one is coming and like maybe they're doing like the personal dances and like their own little special quiet, more quiet area, right? But Michal goes to David, Vatomer, and she says to him, wow, Ma nechbad hayom melech Yisrael. Wow, what an incredibly honorful day that the king of Israel was out. And while he was out, asher nigla hayom le'enei amhot avadav ki higalot niglot achad harekim. Wow, what a special day it was for the king, that he was so into things, he revealed to nobodies, to servants, to female servants, such personal, private parts of who he is, right? Now, even her tone, even the wording is so, I guess the only way I can think of it is so holier than thou, right? So arrogant, so regal, right? Wow. But also so snarky, so like harif, right? But in a very edgy way, right? She's not explicit, she's implicit, right? Wow, what a incredibly wowing, honorful way for the king to show maidservants this part of who he is, right? Inferring, but clearly in between them, explicit enough that David gets the message, right? David, what are you doing? You are the king of the Jewish people. Who do you think you are? Kings don't do this. Kings don't dance like that in public. Kings don't literally like show their ankles and dance in a way that they're into the dance. How inappropriate, David. You are Melech Yisrael. Now, what is his reaction? If we thought she was Harif. He is Harif on steroids, right? Vayomer David el Michal. David responds to Michal and he says, oh, you're going to comment on my inappropriate dancing? Lifnei Hashem, asher bachar bi me'avich umikol beito, litzavat oti nagid al am Hashem al Yisrael. Sichakti lifnei Hashem. Oh, you want to know what I was doing? Oh, I was dancing for God. Oh, let me remind you, the God that chose me over your father and over everyone else in your house. Meaning, what just transpired, right? Obviously, the conversation's not over and we're going to keep going back to it in a minute. But what is she pretty much saying? I'm a princess, right? Besides being on some level a queen, right? I'm also a princess. And David, in case you didn't get the memo, I was the first princess, right? My father was the first king of the Jewish people. So I was raised in a palace, right? I had to sit in those classes of putting books on my head and walking straight, across a room so that my posture would be perfect, right? And I was taught how to sit properly at a table and how many forks you need and what each represents, right? This is how I was raised. So I know what the expectation of royalty is. And clearly, David, you missed the memo. David looks at her and says, all I hear is all the issues Shaul had because he didn't understand that it wasn't about royalty and it wasn't about what people's perception of you was. It's only about God. And understand, Michal, how inappropriate what you said to me is that I am going to be that harif. And I'm going to say to you, oh, you're so worried about my royalty? My royalty is God given by the God who said no to your father and to your brothers and to any of your other relatives, but chose me. So clearly, I know what I'm doing more than you do, right? Pasuk bet, not done. Vini kaloti od mizot, v'hayiti shafal be'inai, ve'im ha'amahut asher amart imam akabeta. Right? And not only would I do it again, kind of concept, right? But even more, I don't care how lowly people see me because this isn't about me. Michal, your father missed the message. He missed the main memo about being a king. It's not about ego and it's not about how anyone's going to perceive you. And it's not about rubbing, shoulders with the right people. It's about putting HaKadosh Baruch Hu first. And I would do it again in a heartbeat, and I'll continue to do it day in, day out, no matter how low I have to go to do it. And it's interesting because if Pasuk Chaf Gimel wasn't there, which we'll get to in a minute, I think us and most Mefarshim would actually wonder, was it okay for David to say this back to her, right? I totally agree with him. He was chosen over her father. But maybe there are certain elements of royalty you need to uphold. And yes, you need to put God first, but there's ways to do it. And maybe on some level, she had a legitimate point, right? Or even if she didn't have a legitimate point, the way you just spoke to her, David, is a little bit harsh, right? A little bit too harsh. It wasn't she who lost the kingdom, it was her father, right? So, but how does the parak end? What's the final pasuk in the parak? Pasuk of Gimel. Michal bat Shaul. Michal, again, the daughter of Shaul. Lo hala yaled ad yom mota. She did not have a child until the day of her death. Now, this is a great machloket in the Mefarshim, right? Did she die in childbirth? We also see other children mentioned under her name. So are those hers? Are those her sisters that she adopted, right? There's so many different ways to interpret this pasuk. But no matter how we see it, whether she had her own children or not, whether she died in childbirth or not, at least personally and for this course, lo achpatli, it doesn't matter to me. Because what do I really believe the pshat is saying in this pasuk? Michal was wrong, right? Clearly, the pshat is saying, not a good thing. Not a good thing, Michal. And I think there's even another way of seeing it, even if it's not a God punishment. Ulai she didn't have children because David didn't want to be with her, right? Ulai, this conversation caused such a rift between the two of them that he didn't want to be with her anymore. And of course, she wasn't going to get pregnant if they weren't going to be together anymore. And therefore, she didn't have any more children post this, right? But no matter how we interpret this pasuk, it is definitely trying to tell us she didn't win this fight, right? And when I say win, I don't mean between the two of them. I mean in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God is saying David was right. this is what needed to be done in this moment. And therefore, I want to pull all of these pieces together tonight because I knew this is, where we're going to press pause. And I want to open the door of Dovid wanting to build the Beit HaMikdash because it's way more complicated and way more in depth. And we'll take at least 1 or 2 classes to do when we reconvene, Bezrat Hashem. But I think tonight's pieces fully help us wrap our heads around this new David, right? Because in the first many prakim that we learned about David, he was a kid. He was Hakatan, right? Literally, he was the Admoni that was a little kid who, the David and Goliath crazy moment, right? The knight in shining armor in so many ways for the Jewish people. And then the runaway, right? The little kid who had to run away from the guy chasing him. And then we slowly watched him develop in that chase into someone who had complete emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That he wasn't going to kill the Mashiach Hashem. He wasn't going to be the one that would take Shaul down. He would keep running and fighting and defend himself, and he knew God would protect him, but he would never have to take revenge into his own hands because God had proven to him that God would take care of it, right? So we saw that level of emunah, right? And then he moves into the Plishti camp towards the end of Shmuel Aleph, and then you see a different side, someone who's a little bit manipulative, who knows he has to push the envelope sometimes to get what he needs to survive, etc. Still not vengeful, but will hold down a fort. And then he becomes king of just Hebron, right? Nobody's greedy. He's no longer running. He has his own mini empire, so to speak, until finally he becomes king over the entire Jewish people. And it's no longer about killing people who think he's anti-Shaul or killing people because they killed someone from Shaul's team and he needs to defend that level of honor. Tonight was just about David, not David in regards to any part of his backstory of Shaul, but just who he is and wants to be as David Melech Yisrael. And he wants to be the king who fights wars, but only the way God tells him. And he wants to be the guy that takes diplomacy and gifts from other nations, which will benefit him and will benefit the country and his people. And then he wants to bring God to be the centerfold of the country. God needs to live in the capital, and therefore the Aron is going to come back no matter what the cost. And even if I fear God, and even if I'm angry at God, that won't change the fact that in that moment, I'm going to do it b'simcha. Because I think if we've learned anything over the last 2 years, it's about holding multiple emotions in the same day, the same minute, right? Those of us who were blessed to live here, right, this past Shabbos in many communities, because there were many Rabbanim that came out, said, say Nishmat, standing up out loud, and say Hallel Hagadol repeatedly in the shul, right, of the Kili Olam Fasto, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Right, to answer, to respond, make it a responsive tefillah. Say Mizmor LeTodah out loud. But at the same time, we're saying Tehillim because the other war is not over. And we have 50 Hatufim we need home. And we have all the Chayalim we need home, safe. And David is teaching us by example how to hold 2 intense emotions. It's not like the fear of God left him in that scene, and it's not like the anger left him, but in the moment where he is going to bring the Aron back, it's going to be b'simcha, because we can compartmentalize those emotions. And he ends with the message, this is why God chose me, because I can compartmentalize, because I can hold multiple truths and multiple emotions. And therefore, I love that we can end tonight together on this moment, hopefully with him as our model, giving us the strength to hold those emotions, to understand that if we put them into their separate categories and boxes almost, right, the moments we need to show each one, we should do it b'lev shalem. Leave the other one in the box, be able to open the one that's necessary at that moment, and then you can flip boxes. But understand that the service of God is holding multiple emotions and multiple truths. May we be zocha to not only hold all those emotions, but let it come out in the true, complete simcha at the ultimate gula, where we will be dancing down the streets in our parade, bringing our karbanot together, be'ezrat Hashem, with the ultimate gula.
Can I ask some questions, please?
Of course. So I'm not going to stop.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much. It was a beautiful ending to the parak. A few questions. Where did the name Oved Edom, a servant of Edom, how could somebody pick a name like that and have Hashem's Aaron in someone who's Oved Edom? I mean, that's
excellent. So a few things. Not only is it Oved Edom, but notice his last name, right, is Hagiti. He's from Gat, right? Gat is not a Jewish city, right? So many of the Mefarshim there say he wasn't a Jew because for a Jew it would have been too complicated. For Dovid to say, no, it's too scary, right? It's too much to come to Yerushalayim, but a different Jew can handle this job. That's that's almost it wouldn't make sense. So therefore the Mefarshim say, he dafka chose someone who would just know, like, oh, we just don't touch that. Like, you don't know enough, like you're missing too much information to appreciate the sensitivity. So it just lives there. Like it's just over there. And therefore it served him beautifully. It ended up being, thank God, amazing for him because he wasn't a Jew. So it was almost like, oh, okay, like it's not one of us, so it's not complicated. It's just there.
Okay. The other thing is to mention is that what is amazing is that he can be angry with Hashem, but still he loves Hashem and he fears. In other words, it's not that it just shows how human he is, and how human and how
beautifully said.
Yeah, he's so human, and we can relate to him because he's so human and because he has all these things, but still he has this emunah and bitachon in Hashem, which is beautiful, which is something for us to learn from. Okay, that's
agreed.
The other thing.
And I think in Tehillim represents that, and I think why we all connect it to Tehillim so much.
Okay, and the other thing is it doesn't say that the Kohanim, that they actually put the Aron now on their shoulders. It didn't say exactly how they brought the Aron properly. In other words, that the Kohanim really put it on their shoulders and walked with the Aron. So I think that was
right.
Was that something that I saw that was a parish on it, because I didn't seem to see it in the pshat.
No, in the meaning here or actually
no, the parak that we read, that it was not.
Oh, it was in a chariot. No one was actually carrying it. It was in a chariot.
Again, even though the halachas that
the second time you're talking about.
Second time, yeah, the second time.
The second time, you're right. It doesn't give any details. Clearly, there was no chariot. Clearly, that didn't go well the first time, right? So it was clearly carried in some other way, but it purposely doesn't give us the details, almost so that no one asks, why didn't they do that the first time? You know what I mean?
Okay, and the other thing is, Vateitzei Michal, Vateitzei Dina. How many times does it have to say the word Vateitzei, a woman, and the repercussions of that, and the difference between Dinah and between Michal, and I think there was another one as well, but there's somebody else, I don't remember.
I think Leah.
No, Leah, Vateitzei Leah, I'm sorry, Vateitzei Leah, not Vateitzei Leah. And is there, just in terms of the two words, Vateitzei, with the woman, and the things that happen with that, Vateitzei.
Interesting. The Mefarshim definitely comment on Leah and Dina. There's definitely that commonality. But I haven't seen it here on Michal, but very interesting. I definitely would love to look into it. It's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, but anyway, thank you so much. Okay, thank
Pleasure.
you.
Have a wonderful night, everyone, and a beautiful, quiet summer.